Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Value of Agile Approaches to MES, Reduced Rollout Time and Fast Time to Value with Grantek and Sepasoft. My name is Sam Russem, and I am delighted to have Keith Adair from Sepasoft joining me today. We've got a whole lot to cover, so let's get started with everyone's favorite subject, rules. Not necessarily rules, more like guidelines. I really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy schedules today to learn and join us. And I want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your session. So first, make sure you're eliminating distractions. Set your phone to silent, turn off email notifications, stop playing fetch with your dog on the side. Realistically, distractions happen. I get it. Do know that we're going to be recording this session today and sharing it after the webinar, so you can always go back and catch up on something if you missed it. Next, take some notes, and not just on what we're saying. Again, you can always go and get that in the recording, but think about how this material applies or does not apply to you and your business and your challenges. Write down what you're learning and wondering, and if your wondering turns into a question that you want us to address, there is going to be a Q&A session at the end of this, so use the chat, which I'm hoping is on the right side of your screen because that's where my arrow is. And we do have Jeff collecting questions for a Q&A, which we'll do at the end of the session. And finally, speaking of your participation, we do have a poll, which I'm actually going to be bringing up for you right now. And we would just appreciate your input. I have a slide a little bit later with some statistics around Agile adoption, and I wonder how that applies to the audience that we have today. So a quick preview of our today's agenda, which we've broken into 6 sections. First, we'll do some quick introductions for Keith, myself, and give some necessary background information on MES. Then we'll get into the real meat of the webinar. I'll talk about Agile management methodologies, its value, and how it compares to the most common alternative, Waterfall. Then I'll hand things over to Keith to talk more about Sepasoft, their solution, and how it can help facilitate Agile MES wins. For our 4th block, I'll talk more about how Grantek has been incorporating Agile methods into our MES strategy. Then we'll go over some general tips for Agile projects before opening up the conversation for a question and answer session. So first, we'll go over our agenda items. Our introductions. Again, my name is Sam Russem, and I am Grantek's Director of Smart Manufacturing. I've been working in the industry for 12 years, including time in automation programming, MES development, product management, and team leadership. I'm based out of Philadelphia, but cover all smart manufacturing customers globally. And my mission is to bring the promise of smart manufacturing to our customers. And I leverage resources from my time with industry organizations like Mesa International and the ISA to do so. Keith, you want to take a couple of seconds to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, folks. I'm Keith Adair. I am the MES Product Manager at Sepasoft. So my main role is around ideation of new products, planning releases and improvements to existing products. I've been with Sepasoft now for going on 5 years here in April. I've worked in support and quality assurance, and I've really enjoyed getting to know folks and their use cases and working with integrators like Grantek and systems designers like Grantek to help people be successful in their MES implementations.
Great, thanks, Keith. So next, I thought it would be beneficial to do a quick introduction to MES and make sure that we're all on the same page before we get into our bigger explainer on Agile and how that can support MES. So when I'm defining MES and talking to a customer about it, I always lean back on the ISA 95 functional hierarchy model to help me out. This standard model has been around for over 20 years and is still a great framework for defining activities and technologies in the manufacturing world. So at levels 1 and 2, you have your manufacturing controls, your sensors, PLCs, and SCADA systems, and data collection systems that are going to help you control your process. These systems tend to be installed within the 4 walls of the plant and need to work in near real time to control physical world assets. If we're going to skip up to level 4, here you have your business planning and logistics systems. These are usually business-scoped, enterprise-wide systems that handle the long-term strategy and logistics for the entire company. Common technology platforms at level 4 include enterprise resource planning, product lifecycle management, master data management, and supply chain management systems. Level 3 is where we're focusing today, the manufacturing operations management layer. It is critical for tying level 4 business systems to the level 1 and 2 control layer. Sometimes these tasks are done manually through planners, supervisors, and lots of spreadsheets, but ideally you're managed through technology with a manufacturing execution system, or MES, a digital technology platform to help manage operations. On the next 2 slides, we'll talk more about what an MES solution actually does and what benefits you can expect from it. When it comes to functionality, I thought it would be nice to organize some common MES functions with the Sepasoft modules that can help you to enable those functions. For example, when you have MES solutions at various plants, that can give you a standard interface, form, and format for communicating plant metrics to a global control tower for global scale insights. Sepasoft's MES enterprise architecture is specifically designed to help you roll up data from multiple MES implementations and give you that global view. You also have modules like OEE Downtime to help with performance management, statistical process control for quality management, and the track and trace module for genealogy and traceability. Now, to realize any of these functions, you need to connect to the right data from a variety of sources, and that's where some of these connectivity modules come into play. Sepasoft provides a few options for connecting to those level 4 business systems. The business connector is designed to streamline common ERP interfaces with a visual programming format. The interface for SAP ERP is an add-on to that business connector to further accelerate connectivity to SAP. And if those 2 modules aren't meeting your needs, there's always the web services module, which is flexible enough to communicate to almost any enterprise level system with a little bit of programming. Sepasoft also enables some extra connectivity downstream to level 2 systems. The recipe and changeover module can help to manage machine parameters based on information in the MES like material scheduling. The instrument interface is also a great tool for sending and receiving information from systems that may not communicate over an industrial protocol like OPC, for example, printers and laboratory equipment. The last function I'll mention here is document and process management. One of Sepasoft's newer modules, document management, helps to integrate documents like work instructions directly into your larger MES and SCADA platform with version control to make your MES a one-stop shop for all your operational needs. So what kind of benefits can your factory expect from implementing some of these functions? To answer that question, I'm leveraging some material from Mesa International and Gartner around the benefits that companies are actually reporting from their MES installations. MES can be a great way to get paper and manual operations off the plant floor. I'll say that Ignition and Sepasoft are particularly well suited for this use case. Perspective and the SQL Bridge modules in Ignition can help to migrate paper forms to mobile-friendly digital versions that write to a database. And Sepasoft's quality module can help you schedule the right forms for the right products at the right time. MES is also a great tool for managing your operational processes, guiding operators through what's expected of them and confirming that their tasks were completed successfully. For factories that do not have a mature MES, you'll usually find a lot of Microsoft Excel filling in the gaps. If you're using Excel to schedule production runs, record order results, or run reports, there's probably an opportunity for you to automate those processes through MES. As you automate those tasks, you're also freeing up human resources to do more value-add work. Transcribing a bunch of paper quality records into an Excel workbook and then copying that information into SAP is not a value-add task, and that resource can probably be better assigned and allocated in your organization. A few more quick ones. Lot tracing and genealogy can be critical for material management and recall situations. I mentioned on the last slide that MES can not only help to manage multiple processes at a site, but it can also streamline the management of multiple plants from your global headquarters. Access to real-time automatically generated information means your operation team gets the information they need in real time. And finally, the data collected and contextualized by MES is a huge enabler for continuous improvement teams looking to find the ideal return on investment from process optimizations. Now that we've gone through some of those introductions and a baseline information on MES, let's jump into the real content of the webinar today: Agile, its value for MES, how Sepasoft can get you there, and how Grantek has been applying this in our processes. We'll start with the definition. Agile is an iterative approach to delivering a project throughout its full life cycle. Agile is iterative. You establish your baseline solution and regularly improve upon it until you have achieved your vision. That strategy leads to fast time to value. That baseline solution you start from is immediately valuable, and each product release continues to expand the value of that solution. Agile is also known for having more of an emphasis on collaboration than traditional project management methods. Trust, flexibility, empowerment, and collaboration between multiple stakeholders, developers, and end users is critical for success, and that's a good thing. While Agile has gotten significantly more popular in the age of the internet, its roots actually date all the way back to the 50s with early iterative software development methods. Those broad techniques in the 50s started getting more formalized, mostly in the 70s, with evolutionary project management and adaptive software development, but they really picked up in the 90s, formalizing around lightweight management methods like RAD and extreme programming to put more formal models around these iterative approaches. But 2001 was the real pivot point with the release of what is still one of the most influential works in the field, the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, and more recently, in 2017, the Project Management Institute updated the PMBOK, the Project Management Book of Knowledge, to its 6th edition, with the most notable change being a renewed focus on iterative and agile methods. So today, we're getting some really interesting statistics around the adoption of Agile. 71% of companies have reported using Agile to manage some of their projects. Manufacturing does lag behind that global number. I personally attribute this to the fact that so much of our manufacturing project experience is rooted in large capital projects with significant asset purchases and not in software development. When you're buying a large physical asset like a palletizer or a mixer, you don't have the luxury of tweaking and iterating on the physical machine over time. We tend to manage software projects the same way, but we're missing out on some of the opportunities and benefits that more iterative software developments can provide, leading to more rapid results that we're accustomed to from the age of the internet and the App Store. Now, back to the numbers, I thought it was interesting to see that 27% of manufacturers rely purely on Agile for new projects. So know that these methods have been applied to manufacturing environments with some success. And speaking of success, there's notable profitability growth from companies that have adopted Agile. So my takeaway for you here is to know that Agile is real, it is used in manufacturing, and it has shown some real results. I'm actually going to look over to my poll here on the side too. So we had asked in the beginning of the session, have you been using Agile to manage software projects in your manufacturing environment? It looks like about 18% of you were saying yes all the time. 40% said yes, but only a little. 25% have not. And the rest of them were either that they don't know or it doesn't quite apply to them. So that's great. So we're kind of seeing some of the numbers in the chat reflect kind of what we've seen in the greater market. So yes, a couple of plants and manufacturers are indeed using Agile all the time. Some have dipped their toes in it, and some haven't quite embraced it just yet, which is around what we would expect. So let's dive a little bit more into Agile management and how you can use it. Some of you may have seen this graphic or some version of it before, and that's because it's just a really great representation of why Agile can be so valuable. Our problem statement here is to build a transportation device, a car. In traditional project management methods like Waterfall, which I'm going to talk more about a little bit later, you'll fully describe the car that you want, and then developers get to build it. The process builds the car piece by piece, and you, the customer, well, you're still walking around town until the very end of the project when your car is delivered. The bottom image is more representative of the Agile approach. So you need a transportation device. Well, let's get you started on a skateboard so you're getting around faster as quickly as possible. We evolved this design over time. The scooter improves the skateboard, which really helps the graphic, but I do know that Keith disagrees with me on and thinks the skateboards are superior. Either way, scooter improves the skateboard, bicycle improves the scooter. At stage 4, we're really moving with our motorcycle, and I guess we really like the feeling of the bike because in step 5, we end up with a slightly different car than we did in the waterfall model, a convertible instead of a hardtop. So A few takeaways here and why I like this graphic. With Agile, you're getting immediate value that improves over time, as opposed to having to wait until the end of the project to get any value out of it. By getting those intermediate solutions, you as a customer are learning more about what you like and what you don't. The design concept of the convertible may never have even come to your head had you not had the experience on the motorcycle before it. But now you know, and you'll get more ultimate value out of the solution. Finally, this also shows you the value of relying on collaboration as opposed to immutable requirements. If your requirements were for a four-wheeled motorized transportation device, then both of these solutions satisfy those requirements. But the Agile methods enable change-friendly spirit as your requirements evolve and ultimately deliver something more valuable without the stress of having to write some ideal specification with every possible detail before the project ever starts. Now for a bit more on what the actual experience of developing a project under Agile is like. So most Agile projects follow a format similar to this one. It all is going to start with your overall vision, which is defined by a product owner through a collection of user stories, which collectively make up the product backlog. Okay, so if you haven't done Agile, here we are in step one, and I've already thrown out a whole bunch of new terms for you. The product owner is the leader of the end customer's team. They are responsible for defining the vision of the solution, working with the development team to make sure they're on track to deliver that vision, and helping to prioritize the development queue. I'll talk about user stories more on the next slide, but think about them as your requirements written from the user's point of view. The grand sum of all your user stories should be representative of your overall vision, and that becomes your initial product backlog. The product delivery team then is going to take that collection of user stories to develop a sprint backlog. These are the features that we're going to focus on for the next 2-week sprint. That sprint backlog is managed by the product owner and the delivery team based on expected value, estimated effort, and dependencies. So, armed with that sprint backlog, the delivery team starts working on their first sprint cycle. Unlike waterfall methods, where you're going to sequentially complete requirements definition, then development, then testing, so on and so on, in Agile, you're designing and developing and testing with the intent of delivering a working feature within that time-bound 2-week sprint. So all of those activities happen together. How do you decide what user stories you're working on and if you are designing or developing or testing on a given day? Well, Agile managers will typically hold a daily Scrum meeting to coordinate activities between all of their team members within a sprint. Then at the end of that sprint, at the end of the 2 weeks, you do get a functional product increment into your active solution. It's important to take the time for the development team and the product owner to evaluate each incremental release. This is going to help you prioritize user stories for the next sprint, and it may add new requests and opportunities to the overall product backlog. This process repeats until the overall vision's met, continuously adding more and more features and value to the solution on a regular basis. Now, I do want to take that deeper dive I promised into a very important aspect of Agile, the user story. Again, these are essentially your project requirements, but they intentionally come with a requirement, an audience, and a reason. Most user stories are going to follow the format as a who, I need to what, so that why. So as a quality manager, I need to automatically schedule quality tests based on the SKU being run so that we run exactly the tests that are required for that product and no more and no less. Or as a line operator, I need to enter downtime reasons within 3 clicks so that I can log the required data with minimal interruption to my operational responsibilities. Both very good, valid user stories. The image on the right also shows you how a user story is represented in Jira, which is one of the leading Agile management platforms. You can see that we have our user story at the top, a more detailed description, which includes more of the why, an individual that it's assigned to, and a number of subtasks that will be required to complete that story. Okay, so now we've talked a bit about Agile, we've talked about MES. Let's talk about why Agile is a good strategy specifically for MES. The 3 most prominent benefits that I see are reducing risk and total cost, fast time to value, and collaboration. Focusing on risk and cost, The biggest risk for an MES system is to buy something big that isn't actually used. I've unfortunately seen this before, oftentimes when management is solely responsible for defining requirements without sufficient operator input, leading to abandoned systems that don't provide any return to the end customer. Another common MES risk is misinterpretation of requirements. I'm sure you've all seen examples where a requirement wasn't detailed enough to convey its true purpose, or where a deliverable is technically right according to the requirements but doesn't meet the true need. User stories and constant collaboration significantly reduce that risk. Now, one of the challenges we all face in systems integration and manufacturing programming is that we're writing software that needs to work in the physical world. It can be tough to develop a solution off-site just to realize it doesn't work quite as expected when you need to apply it to the real world. I'm not saying that Agile totally solves for that risk, but it certainly reduces it by making sure deployments happen early and often. Finally, it gives you as the customer more control over your total cost and anticipated returns. You get to manage the backlog to make sure that your highest value priorities are taken care of first, maximizing your investment. Next, we'll focus on fast time to value. I've said it before, and I will say it again in this webinar. One of the best things about the Agile approach to MES is it gets something valuable in your hands fast. That provides the foundation to continuously deliver regular, valuable additions to the system over time, and the system is always improving. And since that system does go live quickly, it means that you can get feedback from your team and iterate that into the product quickly too. I can't stress the value of this enough. I hate deploying systems that operators don't like, or they feel that it adds extra steps to their job that they don't see the value in. Your people are valuable assets and can significantly contribute to the design of these systems, but that's easiest when they can see and feel the system that they're going to be working with. That user feedback makes more user stories that can be prioritized in the backlog to make a system that is incredibly user-friendly. Not only does that reduce training time, but how great does it feel to provide your thoughts and feedback on a solution and then see that actually incorporated into the system you're working with every day? It's empowering, it's collaborative, and it's a great way to encourage adoption. So I could gush about how great Agile is for the rest of our time today, but really we need to talk a little bit more about the alternatives and what we would be replacing with Agile. In most cases, it's going to be traditional waterfall methodologies like this one, where we break down a project into linear sequential phases. Each phase depends on the deliverables from the previous phase, and that can mean handoffs between different teams as well. Maybe your consultants do the requirements and planning, engineers design and develop, QA runs all the tests before commissioning, and then turnover. In general, Waterfall is going to focus more on upfront requirements gathering, very detailed planning, and thorough documentation. On the plus side, that's going to lead to a very intentional product delivery strategy. And this is definitely a familiar model too. A lot of manufacturers and project managers are well-versed in waterfall delivery models and know what they're getting for it. It's also a particularly good fit for projects with rigid timelines and scopes, and it is very reliant on having well-understood, clearly communicated requirements. However, the system is also more resistant to change. Any new or altered requirement means a change management process, and that could significantly impact your cost and schedule. There's also the issue of the time gap. Depending on the scale of your project, it could be months or quarters or even years between the requirements exercised at the beginning and the eventual system turnover. And in that time, priorities change, stakeholders come and go, and it can really just throw a project off track. With that pressure of a big fixed price project, a lot of companies also find themselves in a bit of a consulting paralysis. Knowing that those well-defined, clear, and detailed requirements are so important, they can also be very tough and stressful to develop and can hold you back from getting to the actual real work and value that you're trying to get to. So let's compare and contrast some of the key ideas we've talked about between Agile and Waterfall. Starting with the end customer engagement. So in Agile, you do have your dedicated product owner who is very involved throughout the life cycle. Whereas in Waterfall, the end customer is going to be more engaged at the beginning to define requirements, but then less so once we get to the development phase. Agile is also going to require high-level requirements up front, but not necessarily a detailed scope, whereas Waterfall needs detailed requirements and a fully defined scope early to be successful. When it comes to change management, Agile embraces scope changes and flaunts its flexibility, whereas Waterfall is going to have a more rigid change management system that can lead to stressful and time-consuming contract renegotiations. In Agile, features are constantly managed and optimized to contribute regular value to the solution, whereas in Waterfall, all features are defined at the beginning and nothing is realized until deployment. This also means that if something were to happen that interrupts the project before completion, with Agile, you're always going to have something valuable that is delivered, where Waterfall is all or nothing. If you cancel a project in the middle of it, you're not going to get any results from it. When you are resourcing Agile projects, you tend to go for smaller, more dedicated and flexible teams, whereas Waterfall, as I had mentioned earlier, is going to encourage more handoffs between specialized teams between phases. And finally, cost structure. Most Agile projects are time and material structured, and customers are paying for the time and knowledge of the development team, whereas Waterfall projects usually lead to a fixed price contract or a fixed deliverable agreed to upfront. So which of these models is going to fit better for you? It can really depend on what your goals are, what your project is, and how your company behaves. But I hope I've given you a good understanding of what Agile is and how it can potentially apply to some of your projects. Next, I'm going to stop talking for a bit and hand things over to Keith to show us more about the Sepasoft product and how it can help you to enable Agile MES wins. So take it away, Keith.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, it's been a total blast listening to you, Sam, talk about agile development processes. We try to use those internally here at Sepasoft. We have a lot of those same schemes where we use that in delivery of our products. And we've seen the benefits even on the product development side. But we also really focus on those things in our implementations with customers. You know, we don't do the integration arm of our products. We rely on folks like Grantek and Sam and his team to help with those things. But we've learned some really good lessons as we've watched folks develop and work on their projects, implementing MES at their plants and in their enterprises. And one of the things we do is a program called the Quick Start program. And the Quick Start program is for all new customers to our solution. And we really dive into their requirements and try to bring as much of the team together as possible. In fact, I think that's a pretty fundamental part of any good project, is having that team all in the room, having that agile team in the room, right? It could be some folks from operations, maintenance, management, IT, quality, right? It could be a different set of folks for a different project. But the point is that if you get everyone in the room or the Zoom, as of right now, you're really able to ensure that the right folks have buy-in to the project. And you're able to deliver, quick wins. If you'll hop to the next slide for me, Sam. This is pulling a bit from a presentation that I had the pleasure of giving with Inductive Automation around a month ago. If you go to Inductive Automation's website, into the webinars section, you'll find that. And it pulls a bit from a book called The Goal from back in the 80s about constraints and elevating constraints and emphasizing constraints. And it feeds you into sort of an agile loop at your plant, right? You identify in your plant the things that are not going extremely well. That's called elevating the constraint. So you meet with your team, you grab those folks that form your key internal investors in the project. You find the things that are slowing you down, your bottlenecks, your constraints. You analyze your data to emphasize those and draw those out. In those constraints, you identify the things that are impeding your slow material flow through your plants. And those are going to be your sources for quick wins. So maybe it's a particular line that is a subset of your project. Maybe it's a given bank of machines or what have you. Find that thing that's slowing you down and emphasize that and make small changes. Pick a few things to alter or improve. And that's going to bring benefits. And, the way that we tend to suggest to folks gently that they measure their benefits is via an OEE score, right? As you make changes, as you make improvements, your OEE score will climb, and you can measure the difference in your OEE score as a measure of how important that change was. And as you get closer and closer to that perfect 100% OEE score, you're going to see the benefits of those changes. It's a virtuous cycle as you make your way through this. And if you have a waterfall development process, you're not able to have this, virtuous cycle so easily. Once you've locked into your product produced out of the waterfall, it becomes very hard to deliver iterative improvements. But if you stick with that sort of agile development workflow, you really have the chance to continuously improve things. Now, if you look at the next slide for me, Sam, what's really what we think is really important about or what's really helpful about our solution is that it helps you to identify constraints and bottlenecks. So, what are your most common reasons for downtime, right? Where are you seeing rework most frequently? Where are you seeing departure from spec or control limits? What suppliers or equipment produces bad raw ingredients, right? All of these things are things that good automated MES solutions, like we believe Sepasoft is, can help you to expose, can help you to draw out, right? Our software is never going to train an operator, right? It's not going to fix a machine or perform a repair. It's going to tell you where your weaknesses are and help you identify those. So that's what we're really trying to empower you to do is identify those constraints and bottlenecks. So in the furtherance of that idea, I want to take a moment and demonstrate a few things here about how Sepasoft is really organized around iterative agile improvement. So I'm going to steal presentership from Sam here. And I just want to go through a few things in the Sepasoft MES suite that make it especially friendly to agile processes. So what you're looking at here on screen is a component called our Equipment Manager component. And it's one of the sort of the development components that we use in the MES suite. It's where you tell us all about your plant or your plants or your sites and what equipment exists. So you see I've selected here my depalletizer or my filler or my sealer or what have you here. By doing so, I can see what tags I've configured as counters on my equipment, or which tag I've configured as the state value on my equipment. Now, if you look here, this tag path here represents the state of my equipment. So if I dive over to this screen briefly to show you what that looks like, as that tag changes in value, we see that reflected in our time chart on screen. So here we can see changes in those states over time. So we can see, in this example here, that the filler or the sealer went from a running state with a code 1 on that tag to a clean in place or a code 14 on that tag to a starve or a code 6 on that tag, right? So that's what that state tag represents back in the Equipment Manager. So if we look at that one more time here, that state tag there is what's giving us that integer that we've mapped into a state name. Now, notice here in that tag path, how it's parameterized. Equipment path 5. That 5 there represents the name of the cell. And so if I organize my tags correctly, I can really quickly add a new machine to the line. So if I have a new cell after the palletizer, if I organize my tags correctly, I can copy and paste that palletizer, rename it to the new name of the equipment, and it's going to automatically map to the appropriate tags. Agile development, where we're really quickly adding new equipment to the line and identifying, what tags represent that equipment. So growth, expansion, further development, addition of equipment, we make that agile and straightforward, hopefully, in the solution. Another example of agile things you can do in the software comes in our SPC module. So in this particular screen that I'm pulling up here, this is sort of a static instruction screen, right? And throwing this screen together takes a matter of minutes. This is a prefab component called the sample entry component, where the sample definition you've configured automatically appears here with the appropriate values. No configuration necessary besides telling us what sample definition you're taking a sample of, right, in our SBC module. Here are my samples collected thus far. And then here's a PDF of work instructions where we're identifying products and showing how to inspect them for nonconformities. And I can say, okay, on this set of products, I have 6 that have bad color, kind of a crummy batch, 4 with bend fractures, 3 with burrs, 4 with missing holes, and 5 missing welds. And I can save that off. Again, stock components bringing you rich functionality and registering on the control charts right away. Bad colors, bend fractures, missing holes, right? We're turning, user input into results very quickly. However, you may want to have a slightly more integrated way of collecting that data from users rather than sort of this little panel here. You may want to have a dynamic form they can fill out. And so maybe this here, right, is the place you start, right? This is the quick win. We're able to take samples fast. But then maybe next you can use something like our document management module. This is called the document viewer, part of that module, where we can have the users fill out sort of a dynamic form. What's your name? How many pieces are you inspecting? So instead of having that little prefab component that we ship, you can have your own unique form that walks them through the process. And it's right in context there. And so as you take that sample, looks bad, you can collect that sample and it drives my Pareto chart right there in the moment, right? So instead of having the separate document from the fields that you fill out, you can integrate that into one process. But then maybe down the road, you can automate that process with a photo eye system or what have you, or maybe a microscope of some kind. Maybe that generates data that we can parse and collect, right? So we're progressing towards a fully automated process. Now I'm simulating that with clicks here, but we're monitoring a device, we're collecting those samples and putting them into a box and whisker chart this time. So we're iteratively, making this process simpler and simpler. And so because we took those steps and built those previous screens, we were able to get that data and collect that data in a more rapid, agile way. But then as time went on, as we had more precise requirements, we could augment those with more automated processes, more integrated processes, and so on and so forth. I just want to emphasize, and bring out one more way in which the solution is amenable to automated processes. And it's actually drawn from our new batch and procedure module that we're releasing in the second quarter of this year. And it's this. When you go to use the batch and procedure module, again, this software is around ISA 88 standard, which is the standard for batched and continuous processes, and managing those procedural step-by-step recipes. So if I pull up a recipe here, it's organized into sub-recipes called unit procedures that have individual tasks, right? So this is a recipe. Now, in the recipe, in the batch and procedure module, you're able to quickly tell us about your plant. Where does your equipment sit physically in your plant? Or array it out such that it looks like your equipment. It becomes very easy to identify a new piece of equipment. So if I were to add a new mixer here, identifying it as a mixer is as quick as a drag and drop. So I'm gonna transmogrify my cooling rack into a mixer here. And so now suddenly, this device picks up all the abilities, all the phases of the mixer. So we're identifying that really rapidly. So the software lends itself to, hey, I've bought a new mixer, I hook that up, and it gains the phases and the tags and everything it needs to be able to act as a mixer in the system, right? And including that in your process cell is as simple as a drag and drop thing. So we're really emphasizing ease of use, dynamic, delivery of results, such that in the moment you're able to execute recipes and see their results and allocate new equipment in a predictable fashion. So those are sort of the things I wanted to break down here, Sam, as examples of the way that the Sepasoft Suite emphasizes agile development and helps you to quickly deliver results. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Keith. I thought that was a really good introduction, and I think that you actually ended that on a note that I really wanted to emphasize, which is about one of the reasons that I think that Agile is such a good fit for Sepasoft and vice versa in general is that idea of starting from core components and expanding over time. So, there's a little bit of a joke in the MES space sometimes where you need to make a decision early in the process if you are going to adapt your software to fit your process or adapt your process to fit your software, right? A lot of other MES players are pretty rigid in the way that their MES software is going to work, and it's up to you to make sure that you have the right data controls and processes that are going to match the way that MES software is expected to respond. Sepasoft does take, I say, the opposite perspective, where it's a tool that you can customize and tune over time to fit a variety of different processes, and it can adapt to you. So the fact that you do have all of these components out of the box, accelerators like being able to copy over previous assets and quickly deploy to new systems and establish that baseline and build over time is very complementary to the Agile approach. So it's one of the reasons that we invited you to be here. So perfect, Keith. Thanks again. So we are a little behind schedule. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through the next subject because I want to make sure that we get to the tips and open up to Q&A. But I'll talk quicker than I was normally planning to on Grantek's approach to Agile. If you want to talk to me more about this, please feel free to follow up after the webinar. So at Grantek, we've taken that Agile methodology and wrapped these general steps around it. So we start with a assessment, then move to a proof of concept, and then we go on to Agile development and evaluation. So it all does start with that MES assessment, with the goal of this phase being for the Grantek team to start working with your team to understand your vision, get a better sense of the technical landscape we'll be working in, and set out our objectives for the next phase, a proof of concept. So this is a quick assessment to really, that is targeted towards getting familiar with each other, understanding your working environments. So really we try to keep the assessment itself to 5 days or less and have that entire phase be done within 2 to 4 weeks to really just make sure that we can get that fast time to value for you and move as quickly as possible into that proof of concept phase. That's where the goal of this phase is to deliver some working MES solution for you that provides value, and we want to do it quickly so that you can believe in the solution and justify that, yes, this is what we want to use. I believe that this can meet the full vision. Let's go ahead and justify the next phases of our investment to get this done. So a lot of benefits to smarting with a smaller proof of concept like this. Again, it gets something valuable in your hands as quickly as possible. That's really the most important thing. At the end of this, you do have a working system deployed on your plant floor that your people can be using immediately and starting to give feedback on. Then we move into more of the Agile phases. We do find it nice to think about some of the stories that go into our backlogs here as iterations, where we are adding new features into the product, adaptations, where we are taking a solution developed for one process, like mixing, and then moving it over to a new process, like packaging, and rollouts, where we're taking a deployment we have done for a specific asset or process and then deploying that at scale. So both of the proof of concept and the Agile development phases, here we're really going through that 2-week sprint cycle that I showed earlier, where we have a structured backlog. We are deciding what we want to focus on for the next 2-week sprints, and we continuously do releases. We try to set those up into campaigns of 8 to 12 weeks, just to kind of keep the funding process rolling and to be continuously developing value into the solution. I told you I would do that quick. Next, I do want to get to our last segment before we get to the questions, talking about some general tips and tricks for Agile projects. So first, I want to dispel the myth that Agile and documentation do not mix. So yes, Agile does focus more on upfront results than it does documentation, but that does not mean that the system cannot be well documented. I will say that since Agile does encourage change, it might make sense to move the bulk of your documentation efforts towards the end of the project rather than the beginning to make sure that you're capturing the final state of the deliverable and that you don't need to be going through and doing major documentation rework every 2 weeks. But in general, a documentation task is just like another user story in your backlog, just like any other feature is. In fact, a lot of Agile management tools like Jira can help to automate documentation tasks for you. On the right side of the screen, you see some testing scripts that our team generated right out of Jira for an FAT. So while Agile projects can indeed be well documented, myth busted. Next, I'm going to bust another myth. If we know that now Agile projects can be documented, but can they be validated? So for those who might not be familiar, validation is a very important piece of any life sciences project, demonstrating that the system works and is as designed and as expected and is thoroughly tested to ensure repeatable, high-quality results. The GAMP-V model shown here is traditionally the go-to approach for validation, but technically, the V model is not specifically required as long as the core values of validation are satisfied and the quality risks are properly managed. The ISPE does state that GAMP, Good Automation Manufacturing Practices, does support the use of incremental, iterative, and evolutionary approaches like Agile for product development and the development of custom applications. You just want to keep those core tenets of validation in mind. So robust quality management systems, organizational culture, having a well-trained and disciplined team, well-defined processes, effective tools and automation, and the proper levels of customer involvement. But can you use Agile to validate a system? Absolutely yes. The fact that you cannot is once again busted. Now, more specific tips as opposed to just me going through and trying to break down some misconceptions. One is from the perspective of a customer. I want to do Agile, and I know I want quick wins, but how do I know what to prioritize for those quick wins that's going to get me the fastest time to value? I'm going to go way back to a survey I showed early in the project around Mesa International and their survey of business value of MES that they do with Gartner. They found some really interesting results on this subject. They surveyed end users about how long it took them to realize their expected benefits from MES solutions in various categories. And then they break it down into what was delivered in what satisfied those requirements within the first quarter and within the first year of deployment. So the leading benefits included reducing reporting latency, improving quality, and regulatory compliance and traceability. So if you're trying to pick what the fast return benefits could be, look towards the items at the top of this list to help identify those potential quick wins. Finally, I want to mention the balance of how you use a product owner in a multidisciplinary team. So again, looking at that Mesa and Gartner survey, budget and implementation owners of MES can really vary from company to company. Operations and IT tend to get an even split, but it can be other business leaders as well. There's a good reason for this. It's that MES projects tend to affect a lot of different parts of an organization, so getting all of these different pieces of input is critical. The guidance from Mesa, which I certainly personally agree with, is to develop a center of excellence, or COE, to help support your product owner. So you still do want, in general, a single product owner to be responsible and the main channel of communications to the development team. But that product owner can have a team behind them as well. They should have a team of various stakeholders all supporting them to make sure that all groups' needs are considered as you are developing your MES solution. And with that, we have gone through our prepared content for the webinar. We've gone through some background on me, Keith, and MES. We talked about Agile and the alternatives and how they fit for MES. Keith gave us a great look at the Sepasoft platform and some of the Agile things that he's learned. I gave you a very quick sense of the Agile MES journey with Grantek, and then we closed with those general tips for success. So I hope you've all found this useful so far, and now we are going to open this up for some audience questions. I believe Jeff has been monitoring the chat up, and he's asking me some questions over our chat window. So I will check this out. Okay, the first question that came in was, how do you quote an Agile project? So this and how I'll actually tie this to another common thing that I see a lot, which is if by definition we're going for a high level scope without necessarily specifics and we're going through this 2-week sprint cycle, how do I convince procurement, of how much budget they need to allocate for a project like this? I would argue that it's actually really not dissimilar from the way that you would quote any other project as a systems integrator. It's just maybe a little bit more transparent, and there's a little bit more risk and collaboration that everyone is accepting as you go through the process. So whether you're asking for a fixed price quote or a time and materials quote, there is usually some math going on in the background to think about what types of people you have and how they're going to be able to contribute and how much effort it's going to take them to get certain tasks done. We're just kind of exposing that and kind of putting that out for each of the user stories that we're developing. And we're usually acknowledging that we're going to be developing that proposal content and the pricing estimates over time. So if you go back and remember the chart that I had of Grantek's methodology, where we have our assessments, then a proof of concept, and then the Agile development phases, normally, the way that we would do it is the assessments are pretty cut and dry, fixed price. We have a good sense of what that costs. And then when we get to the proof of concept and the Agile phases, we can give a high-level estimate for that. And then as we progress through the project, we are constantly just updating the budgets for those future phases and collaborating with the end customer to figure out what's going to fit and what's not. So yeah, there is a little bit more risk that people might be taking on as far as what the total cost is going to look like. But the idea is that risk is balanced out by transparency and just openly talking about how those budgets work out.
Sam, it looks like Jacob's question feeds right into that one.
Okay. Let me see if I can find that one. You want to read that for me, actually?
Can MES Agile work in a fixed price contract paradigm?
Yes, I think it can. I think that there is still a matter of effort and hours that usually are going to go into these things. I think it's a matter of making sure that you understand how you're going to manage things like change and what happens if things are going to extend. But yeah, work with your integrator, hopefully us, if fixed price is a requirement on your side, and we'll talk about the risks and how we can make that work.
I think I'm going to steal Amir's question, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Can you tell us the difference between MES and ERP in automation?
Perfect for you.
Helpfully, huh?
I said that's perfect for you. Yes, please do.
Yes.
Yeah.
They helpfully outlined what those acronyms stand for. ERP being Enterprise Resource Planning, and MES being Manufacturing Execution System. And what's interesting about MES is that it sort of sits between your level 2 and your level 4, right? And so your level 4 being your ERP system, it's the system that looks at the manufacturing process from it's actually agnostic to the manufacturing process. It's up at the enterprise level. It's where the master data about inventory and stock and all those things live. What MES is, it's the bridge from your plant up to that system, right? It's sort of that middle core layer. It's what translates, hey, my machine is its counter value is climbing by 1 every 3 seconds into a count value against a work order on a particular product, right? The MES software contextualizes the raw data streaming from the devices on the plant floor for consumption at the ERP level. So we are what transforms raw equipment data into actionable information up at that ERP system. So without the, every plant has MES. We just joke that sometimes MES stands for multiple Excel spreadsheets, right? It's just a matter of what is your MES going to be? Is it going to be an automated solution that really quickly turns raw data in real time into actionable information for your ERP and for your company? Or is it going to be something that you can turn up once a day, once a week in a printed report, in a PDF, in an Excel sheet? We hope it's the former. That's the goal for MES.
Awesome. And I see you got some good feedback on that response too. Great. I'll take the next one. I see a question that is, for validation, do you validate each Scrum release or wait until the final Scrum and validate that release? You can tell I have my consulting background, as I'll give my favorite consulting answer. It depends. It's hard to say for every organization kind of what you need to validate and what you don't. It can depend on kind of internal practices and policies and things like that. I will say that I think the main tenet here is if the updated system could affect product quality or affect data that leads to decisions that could affect product quality, then yes, that thing should be validated. So honestly, what this might just mean is that it might change some of your perspective on the way that you deploy Agile systems within a development environment, right? You might want to do a couple of sprints in a dev environment and have people working with simulated data before you do your plant floor deployment and do some documentation and validation that might be needed to support that. So I could definitely, if you have more questions around that, I can hook you up with our Life Sciences Strategic Initiative Director, Brian Hayes, who lives in the life sciences world in validation every day and can probably give a much more thorough answer on that than I can. And then one other question that I see in here, this will probably be the last one for the day, but it's a good one, is where would you recommend Agile approaches in manufacturing other than for MES? And that's a great question. So one of the things that I had mentioned earlier, right, was kind of one of the reasons that Waterfall is so popular in manufacturing is the reliance on physical assets in manufacturing, right? We're not a bunch of Apple developers that you only need to deal with one device ever in the physical world, right? And there's only so many things that you can do with it. Actually, a lot of things, but still less things than you can in a factory. So one of the things that made Agile so popular, right, is the age of the internet and is the way that that affects software development, right? You couldn't be doing consistent iterative releases without a channel like the internet to send out those releases effectively. So generally, software-focused projects are the places where Agile is going to fit best, but a lot of manufacturing projects these days have huge software components. So when you're thinking smart manufacturing and Industry 4.0 in the software realm, a lot of that can apply. So advanced analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, things like that almost require an Agile approach to be successful. Okay, so I think with that, I'm going to wrap things up for the day. Thank you all again for taking the time to join us. If you do have any questions, you can always email us at info@grantek.com. And you can also be sent a recording. And if there's anything that you need, again, info@grantek.com, great way to reach out to us. And if you need to reach out to Sepasoft too, we're happy to use that Grantek address to help federate some of those questions. So with that, we will close up for the day. Thank you all again so much for your time. Oh, and thanks for the praise in the chat. I see all that too and appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. We'll do another one of these really soon and have a great rest of your day.